You're still going to watch just for the heck of it, right? Voice of College Football SEC breaking down the Bama schedule game by game and the win probabilities. And no, they're not all 100%. After Bama bludgeoned through their schedule 13-0, they were challenged once, basically by Florida 52-46. The rest of the games, blowouts. Although Ole Miss, yes, the Rebels may have given, in some ways, Alabama its toughest test. That game was tied with about 6 or 7 minutes left to play before Bama scored the final 2 touchdowns to win 63-48. All right, win probabilities from the top to the bottom. The top might be 100% and the bottom might be like 98%. No, here we go. New Mexico State on November the 13th. New Mexico State, the Aggies, they have a one-game history against Alabama. That coming in 2019. 62-10 tied against the Aggies. So we go 99%. You can round up to 100%. We're at 99.9. All right, next up is Mercer, Game 2, September 11th in Tuscaloosa. We go 99.whatever%. Mercer's still playing football right now. FCS spring schedule. The Mercer Bears, at the time of this recording, at 3-5, will play a 10-game season. So most of these teams in the FCS playing 3 to 5 games. Mercer at 10 games, and their final game on April 17th. Then they will have to come back to fall camp pretty quickly after that to get ready for Alabama in week 2. All right, our 98% probability win for Alabama comes against Southern Miss, a team that went 3-7 in 2020. The Tide leads this series all-time 35-6, and we're including forfeits and NCAA probation vacated wins. Bear Bryant actually lost one of his final games to Southern Miss in his final season at Bama in 1982, 38-29. The last time Southern Miss defeated Alabama was back in the year 2000. And yes, young college football fans, Alabama at one point in the late 90s, early 2000s used to lose to teams like Southern Miss. This one wasn't even close, 21-0. Jeff Bauer against Mike Dubose. The Tide and the Golden Eagles. We go Bama 98%, the 2021 version. All right, move it ahead to November 20th against Arkansas. The Hogs at 3-7 this past season. That a huge improvement, of course, under Sam Pittman in his first season. We give the Tide at 95% against the Hogs. This a 21-8 Tide lead in the series all time. Nick Saban's 14-0 against Arkansas, including the biggest win in the series history, 52-0 in 2012 when Bama won the national championship. Go back to 1998, another Mike Dubose Alabama team with a distinguished 42-6 loss against Arkansas and Houston Nutt. Give Bama a 95% chance here in 2021 against Arkansas. Next up, Tennessee in Tuscaloosa on October 23rd. Of course, one of the great rivalries in college football, but Bama's won it 14 consecutive years with Nick Saban on the sideline. They lead the all-time series 57-38. So think about this. It was 43-38 when Nick Saban took over. Now has widened out to, again, 57-38 for the Tide. Tennessee won 7 straight back in the 90s with Peyton Manning and others at quarterback. Tied with a 94% chance of winning this one, according to our probabilities. All right, Mississippi State's the foe in Starkville on October 16th. These two teams usually tussle in November, but an earlier scheduled meeting this time around. 83-18 for these old-time rivals. That this is one of the closer series in regards to proximity geographically in the SEC, with just about an hour and a half between the two schools. Saban's first year at Alabama in 2007, he lost a game to the Bulldogs and Sylvester Croom, 17-12, but it's been a whitewash for the Tide ever since, although a very close game in 2017 that propelled Alabama to its stretch drive to get to the college football playoff, thanks to Calvin Ridley and Jalen Hurts' heroics late in Starkville. Tied with a 93% chance of winning this one against Mississippi State. All right, October 2nd, the matchup of Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban, Part 2. Ole Miss visits Tuscaloosa. The Rebels coming off a bowl win against Indiana to finish at 5-5. Again, as we referenced earlier, a close game against the Tide in Oxford last season. The last time Alabama lost to Ole Miss was, of course, Hugh Freeze back-to-back against Nick Saban in 2014 and 15 in winning those two. But Alabama has completely dominated this series, 52-10 with 2 ties over Ole Miss. 92% chance of Alabama winning this one against Lane Kiffin and company. All right, the opener, the big non-conference game, is in Atlanta against the Miami Hurricanes. And this being a non-conference foe, of course, most of the matchups were meaningful postseason play, and the last two meant a whole bunch, meaning everything to these respective programs. The last time they met on the field was back in 1993, and Alabama pulled off the upset as a double-digit underdog at the Sugar Bowl to win the national championship for Gene Stallings, 34-13. Rewind 4 years, and Miami closed out a national championship season with a win in the Sugar Bowl against Alabama and Derek Thomas, 33-25. So the last 2 times Miami and Alabama have met, it meant a national championship. They meet in Atlanta. Let's give Alabama a 91% chance of winning this game. This is how dominant we believe the Tide is, even against a top 15-20 team in the country that went 8-3 last season. On this September 4th game, the opener. Let's move on to the Iron Bowl, the final weekend of the season, of course, November 27th, on the Plains this time. Gus Malzahn, after an 8-year stretch against Nick Saban, in which he favored pretty well at 3-5, turns over the reins to Brian Harsin. And Gus Malzahn, I would say, had the best record of current coaches, certainly against Saban in the SEC. Urban Meyer would be the coach with the best record of SEC coaches against Saban during his run there. Saban only 9-5 against Auburn, and the Tide leads this series at 47-37, just a 10-game spread between Auburn and Alabama. Bama won it big in 2019. All right, we moved on to the SEC championship game rematch, this time in Gainesville. Third game of the season at Florida. Gators finished with a 3-game losing streak to fall to 8-4. In many respects, they gave the Tide its closest game, at least on the scoreboard, in 2020. These two teams have met in the most SEC championship games, 10, including last year. 26-14, the Tide leads the all-time series, and they've got an 83% chance of defeating Florida in 2021. Now on to LSU, and the Tide has dominated this series against the Bayou Bengals, even though this is typically the game that SEC fans circle. LSU 5-5 last year. Of course, Bama won the game big, 55-17. Joe Burrow and company won the only game LSU's won in the series, going back to the 9-6 game of the century in 2011 before the Tide avenged the loss in the BCS championship game. Nick Saban, interestingly, of course, was at LSU for 5 years and went 4-1 against Alabama at LSU. And now Nick Saban is 10-4 for the Tide against LSU. And finally, the game that Alabama is most likely to lose, but still a heavy favorite, at Texas A&M against the Aggies, who finished last season at 9-1, number 4 in the country. And this game on October 9th at College Station. Bama's 11-2 all-time against Texas A&M. Interestingly enough, one of the wins was Gene Stallings as the Texas A&M coach in 1968, defeating Bear Bryant. And then, of course, the Johnny Manziel game that propelled him to the Heisman Trophy in Tuscaloosa in 2012. The last 3 meetings have been Bama 3-score victories against Texas A&M. They take on the Aggies in College Station, probably the game of the year in the Western Division of the SEC. On October the 9th, we give the Tide a 78% chance of winning this one against Jimbo Fisher. Your thoughts down below on Alabama's possible losses, if there are any. Leave your comments down below. And, of course, like the video, share the videos out on social media, and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football, SEC.